morning, Asia. Good evening, America. You're watching World DNA with me, Jyotsna Kumar.
And I'm Diksha Bisla, and coming up on the show today, US President Donald Trump has warned Iran against charging ships in the Strait of Hormuz after a ceasefire deal. Accusing Tehran of violating the agreement, Trump said that oil flow will resume with or without Iran's cooperation. We'll get you the latest on that front on the show today. Stay tuned.
Also on the show, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered direct talks with Lebanon, focusing on disarming Hezbollah and pursuing peace. The U.S. will host upcoming ceasefire discussions, even as Lebanon demands a truce, something Netanyahu says is not currently in place. We'll get you all the details on that front as well. Let's begin with the headlines.
US President Donald Trump says Iran is doing a very poor job of allowing oil through the Strait of Hormuz and accuses it of breaching terms of ceasefire agreement. Trump also warns Iran against imposing a toll for ships passing through the waterway.
Marine traffic data shows only about a dozen ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz in the first 2 days of the ceasefire agreement. That is far below the normal traffic level before the war.
Israel and Lebanon will hold negotiations next week in the United States after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered direct talks, but rejects any calls for stopping its offensive against Hezbollah first. Hezbollah lawmaker rejects of any direct negotiations.
Israel's military tells residents of Beirut's southern suburbs to evacuate, warning them of imminent strikes.
In his latest written message, Iranian Supreme Leader Mujtaba Khamenei says that Iran does not want war with the United States and Israel, but would protect its rights as a nation.
Ahead of US-Iran talks, Israel slams mediator Pakistan over its defense minister Khawaja Asif's post calling Israel evil and a curse for humanity. Israeli Prime Minister's office says such statement cannot be tolerated.
Ukraine and Russia will cease fire for the Orthodox Easter holidays, announcing a 32-hour halt in fighting. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said earlier this week that he had made a holiday truce proposal through the United States.
The lies linking me with the disgraceful Jeffrey Epstein need to end today.
U.S. First Lady Melania Trump denies connections to late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, saying any claims linking the two need to end. The First Lady calls for congressional hearings for survivors of Epstein sex trafficking.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is expected to visit India next month following a productive meeting with Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri in Washington. U.S. Ambassador to India Sergio Gore said the talks focused on bilateral relationship, especially trade, critical minerals, defense, and the Quad.
Oil prices rise with U.S. crude at $98 and Brent near $97 as 20% of global supply through the Strait of Hormuz remains disrupted. Saudi output drops by 600,000 barrels per day, keeping markets on edge despite a 2-week ceasefire. Now, after 40 days of war, multiple ultimatums, and a last-minute ceasefire, U.S. and Iran are set to hold diplomatic talks aimed at establishing long-term peace.
Well, the high-stakes engagement comes as fragile truce between U.S. and Iran enters its third day. The stage is set in Islamabad, but a lot of ground still remains to be covered. The Strait of Hormuz, Israeli strikes in Lebanon, and Iran's enriched uranium. These are some of the main sticking points.
Iran's 10-point plan includes a list of demands that U.S. has refused to accept in full. The American demands include Iran opening up Strait of Hormuz and abandoning its nuclear weapon ambition. Israel, on the other hand, wants Iran to end its support for Hezbollah, Hamas, and Houthis.
Both sides are dispatching their top officials to Islamabad. The American side will be led by Vice President J.D. Vance. He will be joined by Trump's two trusted negotiators, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and advisor Jared Kushner. Meanwhile, the Iranian side is expected to have the country's top diplomat, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, and Speaker of the Parliament Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf.
First of all, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif will host separate meetings with both delegations. The actual negotiations will be mediated by Pakistan's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar. According to reports, Iranian and U.S. delegation will be sitting in separate rooms. Ishaq Dar and team will work as carrier of messages between them.
Pakistan has emerged as a key mediator between both Tehran and Washington since the onset of war. And this serves Pakistan's interests as well, as Islamabad has mutual defense agreement with Saudi Arabia. Riyadh's involvement in war would have dragged Pakistan into war with another neighbor. Now, apart from this, prolonged blockade on the Hormuz Strait could drag Pakistan's economy into a deeper crisis.
And owing to the importance of these talks, security has been beefed up in Islamabad's red zone, and local holidays have been declared in for security purposes. Authorities in Pakistan locked down a 3-kilometer zone surrounding the Serena Hotel in Islamabad. Delegations from both nations are expected to stay at the 5-star hotel, which informed all current guests to check out until Sunday.
Now, this will be the first time since 2011 when U.S. Vice President will set a foot inside Pakistan. Last U.S. Vice President to visit Pakistan was Joe Biden in 2011, and this was the same year when U.S. conducted special operations inside Pakistan to kill Osama bin Laden. The last U.S. President to visit Pakistan was George W. Bush in 2006.
Now, we are already 3 days into a 14-day ceasefire. Military strikes have stopped, where American troops and Iranian army are still on war alert. And according to reports, Islamabad talks could last for days before any substantial agreements could be reached for the permanent end of war.
Seems like that would be the best thing.
All right, well, to discuss more, we're now being joined live by James A. Russell from Ontario, California. He's an associate professor in Department of National Security Affairs at NPS. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure having you on our show.
I don't have any audio.
Oh, well,
I
we
can't
will.
hear you.
Okay, we will get back to you. We'll solve. Are you able to hear us?
I hear you now, yes, thank you.
Perfect, that works. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Appreciate you coming. We'll begin with, of course, the 10-point agreement that is in place right now. It seems like both the sides are not really agreeing to what this 10-point plan is. Trump is not happy with the Iran, and he's saying that they're doing poor job of maintaining or not opening the Strait of Hormuz. At this point of time, how fragile or stable do you think this ceasefire is?
I don't think it's stable at all, very regrettably, I might add. The United States and its political leadership is displaying the same incompetence and incoherence that have characterized its public pronouncements since the shooting started about a month ago. President Trump said that the Iranian plan provided the basis for discussions, for negotiations. And now here he is, a couple of days later, backtracking on the things that were in Iran's plan, like, for example, control over the Strait of Hormuz, like stopping the shooting in Lebanon. So it's not clear where we are going at this point, except that I would give the talks about a 50-50 chance of actually proceeding. At least, I should say, from the American perspective, at least there is somebody in the delegation that's empowered to speak for the government, which is, of course, the vice president. Witkoff and Kushner have no authority to pass.
Right, Professor Russell, and while there are still a lot of deadlines which need to be addressed, now Lebanon has emerged as the latest contingency, which is, of course, playing out the way it is playing out. Trump has said that Israel is going to be scaling back, while Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that the offensive against Israel, offensive against Hezbollah, is not going to be stopped, and there's no way to disarm Hezbollah by, taking back the military aggression. How do you think that is going to play out in the negotiations or affect it going forward?
I don't think that it is going to play a part in the negotiations, which is to say, I don't think Israel has any intention of ceasing its military operations in Lebanon. Of all the three parties in this bargaining framework, it's in Israel's interests to keep the war going, to keep bombing people. That's their preferred outcome. And I think you may see some kind of temporary agreement in Lebanon, but they're not going to stop the war in Lebanon. They're in the process of annexing southern Lebanon. And the only way that this can stop is if the United States chooses to stop providing the Israelis with ammunition and money and political support. And I think the presence of Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff in Islamabad tells you everything you need to know about the American government's predisposition to want to rein the Israelis in. And so, in other words, they're not going to put any serious boundaries on Israeli behavior. And Israel would be happy to wreck the ceasefire in any event.
Professor, I would like to take that forward. Now, what would that mean for Iran? Would Iran choose, because of the Strait of Hormuz is a leverage for them, would they choose that as a point to be able to say that in our negotiations with the U.S., we will want Israel to stop attacks on Lebanon? Because in the end, of course, its axis of resistance contains Hezbollah. What would it mean? Is Iran at crossroads at this point to just defend its own nation or also support Hezbollah at this point?
I think this is, of course, the right question to be asking. And I think my guess is that Hezbollah would stand down if they got the order from the supreme leader in Tehran. And as you say, we go back to the situations that existed when the shooting was going on, which was that Iran retains control over the Strait of Hormuz. When Donald Trump agreed to the Iranian 10-point plan, that was in there. And so now Trump is, of course, claiming that's not what I thought. And so, as I said at the outset, it's the same sort of level of incompetence and incoherence on the U.S. side in terms of knowing what's in these proposals and being able to fashion positions. And I should also add that your question brings up this, of course, very salient point, which these are very complex region-wide negotiations with, for example, the situation in Lebanon being among them. And the United States delegation does not have the kinds of detailed expertise and knowledge about these matters that it really needs, because Trump won't allow America's professionals to participate in these discussions. So I think it's kind of highly unlikely that the United States and Iran are going to be able to hammer out the kind of detailed agreement. It's not a deal. I know the president likes to refer to these things as a deal, but what the Iranians want is a comprehensive peace agreement which means details, it means fine print, it means having delegations in place that can put together the structure of these kinds of things, which are quite complicated and need seasoned professionals, which the US does not have on its team. So here we sit again with the Americans going into Islamabad with its maximalist positions, insisting that the Iranians must essentially surrender everything. And with the Iranians being, well, we've been fighting for the last month and we've seized control of the Strait of Hormuz and we want reparations, we want security guarantees, we want all of these things, which of course were not on the table the last time these delegations met. So it's just, again, another example of countries, in this case it's Israel and the United States, thinking that somehow blasting away from 12,000 feet is somehow going to make the political problems less complicated, when in fact it's the opposite. The political problems become more complicated, not less so.
Professor Russell, you've raised a very important point that at this stage in the conflict, it's very important to have that attention to detail and clarity in communication. And we understand that this has become a narrative, a battle of narratives at this point, apart from just being a battle of power. And the uncertainty over the Strait of Hormuz continues. And as you've just mentioned, it's a leverage that Iran did not have before the attacks began. And the White House is saying that there is a discrepancy between what the Iranian regime is admitting in public and what it is saying in private. What do you make sense? How do you make sense of these contradictions that are also coming up, especially at this very delicate stage in the conflict?
Well, I think so. Of course, in any negotiation like this, you're going to have public posturing, and then at least in theory, you're going to have actual, real conference room exchanges. When I say conference room, what I mean is subject matter experts trying to work through the mechanics of agreements on the issues that are under discussion. And of course, Iran has an interest in staking out what I would call a maximalist position, as the United States does to a certain extent. But in Iran's case, one of the as you correctly note, I think, the major thing that actually has really changed, one of the many things, but the big thing is the seizure of the Strait of Hormuz by the Iranians and the establishment, of course, of some kind of toll system that countries are going to be forced to acknowledge and participate to use the strait. Of course, now, again, this was in the Iranian proposal that Donald Trump said was the basis for an agreement. Now Trump is claiming that, they have to open the strait to all shipping. So again, we are left with, as you said, these sort of competing narratives. And if I'm in the Iran kind of camp at this point, I would say that they have a significant amount of leverage in strait closure issue, which, as you correctly note, I think, potentially gives them the leverage on several of the other issues at play. But the trouble is, with that, we're thinking about this in classic rational cost-benefit calculus terms. If you're on the American side, and the how to characterize the American side is one, again, of obtuseness and strategic incoherence. Trump claims that he's achieved a great victory when most of the world opinion scratches their head and they can't understand what Trump is talking about half the time. He's talking about wiping out civilizations and using nuclear weapons, and says that opening the strait is someone else's problem, and the next day he's changed his mind, which raises this other problem that the Iranians, they would be sort of quite legitimately confused about this. And how do they trust anything that comes out of the mouth of American officials? I'd be surprised if they met with either Kushner or Witkoff in Islamabad after the treatment they've gotten from both of these guys, who obviously can't be trusted. And the last round of these negotiations clearly were a ruse after Netanyahu and Trump agreed to launch the war. So Iran is in a they're in a difficult circumstance in terms of whether they actually have a real negotiating partner who can be trusted and who will follow through on commitments, when the behavior of the United States over the last month tells them otherwise. And I should hasten to add, this is not just in Iran, of course, it's in all sorts of political interactions all around the world, like with the NATO allies, for example. So all I can to sort of try to put a positive spin on this is that let's just hope that the American negotiators come to the negotiating table prepared to take yes from the Iranians. It was clear in the last round of negotiations or meetings between them that there was no circumstance under which that Kushner or Witkoff were going to take yes from the Iranians on a number of issues, and they were taking us down the path to war. All we can hope as concerned global citizens is to hope that that is not the case today, that the United States is prepared to actually address Iranian grievances, and all we can do is hope that having someone like Vance on the team will lend itself to this kind of exchange. And just as a brief footnote to the Vance presence, I would commend all of your readers to look at the New York Times piece from 2 days ago about the Trump administration's decision to launch the war against Iran, which came following meetings in the White House between Netanyahu and the Mossad and Trump. And the only person in the Trump administration the only adult on the American side is J.D. Vance, who's asking questions about what's the purpose of the war,
Yes.
how long is it going to go, what do we hope to achieve? He's the only adult in the room.
We hear you. Absolutely, we hear you. Of course, JD Vance. But then in the end, of course, that's like one of the things that we see, that of course we have someone who is actually going for this negotiations. On the other hand, what does it mean for Israelis? Because let's talk about the war goals that they had talked about, regime change or the dismantling of uranium. Even if you know what U.S. has said in the agreement is hand over Iran's stockpile of already enrichment to International Atomic Energy Agency. That's some of the points that U.S. has said. But do you think Iran would agree to that? Because now, as you mentioned, and also my colleague had also mentioned about the fact that Iran actually has a lot of leverage with the Strait of Hormuz and a lot of points which they did not have before the war. So in the end, who has the ball now? Because when we look at it, then we also have something that Iran has always been saying: we will not have nuclear energy, which is something they said before the war as well.
Right. So this is again, this returns us to a certain extent to the state of play as it existed before the shooting started, in which, again, the American view was that they wanted essentially to recreate some version of the Obama administration's agreement to limit Iran's peaceful nuclear program that it is entitled to as a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The cynics out there, and I might even be among those cynics, would say that the actions over the last month have pushed Iran over the edge. I think it's a virtual certainty that they will probably try to develop a bomb, because they see this as the only way to prevent the additional attacks from either the Israelis and or the United States. In the negotiations, though, that existed or were going on, according to press reports, Iran was again prepared to offer up the enriched uranium, prepared to place it under some form of International Atomic Energy Agency supervision in exchange for relief of sanctions. So I think the point of these negotiations, so to speak, is that Rome is not going to be built in a day, which is to say that they're not going to get through all of these complicated issues in this relatively short amount of time. But the point of such negotiations, drawing from a page of American history with the Soviet Union, for example, in the Cold War, is that you build these agreements piece by piece. And the place to start would certainly be, at least in my opinion, would be the Iran nuclear program, and then the issue of its enriched uranium. Supposedly, the Iranians again say they may be willing to discuss this, although, again, So,
Of course,
let's
Professor
hope.
Russell, and the question on everybody's mind is that what would it take for both of the sides to actually achieve a permanent breakthrough, but also what happens if these, if this 2-week window fails to produce one. But of course, we'll have to wait and see. For now, thank you so much, Professor Russell, for joining us in the broadcast and sharing your perspective with us.
Thank you.
Now we have some breaking news coming in related to, of course, developments in West Asia. Iran has denied U.S. media reports that its negotiating team has reached Islamabad for talks.
Well, sources tell Iranian media that Iran has no plans to participate in the peace talks until a ceasefire is established in Lebanon. Now, the denial comes after a report by the Wall Street Journal, which claimed that an Iranian delegation had arrived in Islamabad late Thursday.
Now, according to Fars news agency, sources denied the entry of the Iranian negotiation team into Islamabad, and this source told Fars that according to Iran's official announcement to Pakistan, until a ceasefire is established in Lebanon, Iran has no plans to participate in peace talks in Islamabad with the American side.
Well, the Wall Street Journal claimed that an Iranian delegation has entered Islamabad to start negotiations with Washington. This is the latest, the big development that's coming in at this hour, where now Iran has denied U.S. media reports that its negotiating team has reached Islamabad for talks. And of course, Lebanon has now featured as the latest contingency in the talks between U.S. and Iran. Sources say that Iranian media has said that Iran has no plans to participate in peace talks until a ceasefire is established in Lebanon.
Right, and this is also when there's a ceasefire between the U.S. and, of course, in Iran right now, where there is a peace agreement, or rather, I would say, a ceasefire agreement that is between, which still holds, which is extremely fragile. And at the same point now, Iran has now denied that these media reports that say that its negotiating team has reached Islamabad for talks.
And with that, it's time for us to slip into a very short break on World DNA.
Of course, coming up on World DNA, 2 states and 1 union territory in India went to polls on Thursday. Assam, Tehran and Puducherry saw voting for their legislative assemblies, and the results are scheduled to be announced on 4th of May. We'll get you all the details on the other side. Keep watching WION World is One.
In West Asia, every move shifts the world's balance. Wars, ceasefires, alliances, power never stands still. From Tehran to Tel Aviv, from Damascus to Doha, the West Asia Post cuts through the chaos to reveal the region that shapes the world. Because what happens in West Asia never stays in West Asia. This is the West Asia Post, the region's story, the world's impact.
Get the latest updates.
Destroy their
Breaking
missiles
news.
and raise their...
Credible, clear, continuous. Experts across aisles. Diverse voices, one platform. WION World is One.
5 states, one powerful voice.
From Tamil Nadu to West Bengal.
Kerala to Assam. Every vote shapes the future. Get the election pulse only on WION.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching World DNA with me, Jyotsna Kumar, and my colleague Diksha Bisla. Let's begin with the headlines and continue with our updates on West Asia.
Iran has denied US media reports that its negotiating team has reached Islamabad for talks. Sources tell Iranian media that Iran has no plans to participate in peace talks until a ceasefire is established in Lebanon.
U.S. President Donald Trump says Iran doing a very poor job of allowing oil through Strait of Hormuz and accuses it of breaching terms of ceasefire agreement. Trump also warns Iran against imposing a toll for ships passing through the waterway.
Marine traffic data shows only about a dozen ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz in the first 2 days of the ceasefire agreement, which is far below the normal traffic level before the war.
Israel and Lebanon will hold negotiations next week in the U.S. after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered direct talks but rejects any calls for stopping its offensive against Hezbollah first. A Hezbollah lawmaker rejects of any direct negotiations.
Ahead of US-Iran talks, Israel slams mediator Pakistan over its defense minister Khwaja Asif's post, calling Israel evil and a curse for humanity. Israeli Prime Minister's office says that such statements cannot be tolerated.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is expected to visit India next month following a productive meeting with Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri in Washington. U.S. Ambassador to India, Sergio Gore, said the talks focused on bilateral relationship, especially trade, critical minerals, defense, and the Quad.
Ukraine and Russia will cease fire for the Orthodox Easter holidays, announcing a 32-hour halt in fighting. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said earlier this week that he had made a holiday truce proposal through the United States.
The lies linking me with the disgraceful Jeffrey Epstein need to end today.
U.S. First Lady Melania Trump denies connections to late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, saying any claims linking the two need to end. The First Lady calls for congressional hearings for survivors of Epstein's sex trafficking.
Asian markets rose higher, with Japan up 1.6% and South Korea gaining over 1% as a fragile US-Iran ceasefire keeps investors cautious. On Wall Street, the S&P 500 rose 0.6%, with US futures pointing to a steady open. As a fragile truce between US, Iran and Israel hangs in balance, the world is closely watching the upcoming peace talks.
The negotiations, which are slated to begin on Saturday in Pakistan, are already shrouded in confusion and contradictions. And of course, the big question is, who benefits most from a 2-week ceasefire? And if talks fail and the war resumes? Let's break it down for you.
Now, US President Donald Trump has slammed rhetoric and reports on the conditions of this 2-week ceasefire. This is his second statement after remarks on Thursday, accusing false reports and clarifying that the real grounds for ceasefire remain private.
In his post, Trump said that American military will remain in place until real agreement reached is fully complied with. He went on to say that in case that does not happen, U.S. troops will resume their attack on Iran.
Currently, U.S. has the world's largest aircraft carrier, USS Gerald R. Ford, which is deployed in the region, along with USS Mahan, USS Winston S. Churchill, and USS Bainbridge.
America also has aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln deployed with 4 other naval destroyers.
Now in air power, US has dozens of fighter jets, including F-35s, F-22s, F-15s and F-16s, along with F-15E Strike Eagle, Super Hornets and B-2 bombers deployed in the region, at its strategic bases in Europe as well.
Washington also has over 50,000 troops in the region, which analysts say is 10,000 more than normal estimate, as U.S. continues to strengthen military presence around Iran.
Now, despite the military threat and political pressure from Trump, Iran's leadership maintains its stance on having all its conditions met. Top leadership has slammed the U.S. for violating 3 clauses of the 2-week conditional ceasefire.
Even when talks were ongoing for a truce, Iran's leadership repeatedly said that the country wants a lasting peace deal with guarantees of no future attacks. They also accused U.S. and Israel of using a temporary ceasefire to buy time to rebuild military pressure in West Asia.
But the same can also hold true for Iran. The Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, who control missile production, said a few days ago that the Islamic Republic has continued to produce missiles even when the war was underway. Analysts estimate that Iran has built a stockpile of around 17,000 missiles in the last 15 years. And these include the more modern cruise missiles. A halt in attack paves the way for Tehran to ramp up its production.
If ceasefire talks and conditions of the truce fail and the war resumes, Iran will not be alone. The axis of resistance, particularly Hezbollah, has been active in this war, firing missiles at Israel since early March.
Meanwhile, Yemen's Houthis, they have joined the war much later. The rebel group fired its first missiles on March 27th in a careful and calculated operation. Even after that, the strikes have remained limited.
Now, Houthi leader Abdul Malik welcomed the 2-week conditional truce and hailed it as a victory for Iran.
But 2 days before a ceasefire was announced, the Houthi rebels threatened to block the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Now, the strait is another strategic maritime choke point which separates Yemen and countries in the Horn of Africa region. Houthis are strategically placed to block the strait with attacks, which is just 18 miles wide.
Now, this will become the second strait which will get choked by Iran and its allies, along with the Strait of Hormuz together. Both maritime passages account for over 25% of global trade. And despite a holding ceasefire, West Asia continues to remain on edge, with the Strait of Hormuz becoming the latest flashpoint between the U.S. and Israel.
And while
Iran.
Of course, and while Trump has accused Iran of obstructing global oil shipments and threatening maritime trade, Iran's leadership has defended its actions as a legitimate exercise of sovereign rights.
In a series of blunt warnings posted on Truth Social, U.S. President Donald Trump, there were reports of Iran charging fees to tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz. He warned that if Iran is doing this, they must stop immediately. Trump also slammed Iran for doing a very poor job of allowing oil to flow freely through the strait, calling it dishonorable. He claimed it was inconsistent with agreements that they had with them.
Now, rejecting reports that he claimed premature victory, Trump insisted his policy was to ensure that Iran never acquires nuclear weapons and vowed that oil will continue to flow through the Strait of Hormuz very quickly, with or without Iran's cooperation.
Meanwhile, Iran's leader Moshtaba Khamenei issued a statement which was read on state television, declaring that the country is entering a new phase in its management of the Strait of Hormuz. He emphasized that while Iran does not seek war, it will firmly uphold its legitimate rights.
And certainly, we are entering a new era with the management of the Strait of Hormuz. We did not seek war and do not want it, but we will not renounce our legitimate rights in any way. And for this, we consider all the fronts of resistance as one.
All right, now shifting our focus to India, 2 states and 1 union territory went to polls on Thursday. Assam, Kerala and Puducherry saw voting for their legislative assemblies.
Now, the results are scheduled to be announced on 4th of May. 296 seats across 3 states are up for grabs between regional and national parties.
Now, the state of Assam recorded 85.71% voter turnout as per the latest count. The state has turned into a high-stakes battle between 2 national parties. The Congress party is looking to de-seat Himanta Biswa Sarna from the position of Chief Minister, while BJP is hoping that he retains the position for a second time.
Now, Sarma is contesting from Jalukbari seat. He has been winning from this seat in consecutive elections since 2001. Congress has fielded newcomer Bidisha Nug to challenge Sarma from Jalukbari.
Meanwhile, Congress heavyweight and Assam State Party President Gaurav Gogoi is contesting from the Jorhat seat. He is currently a member of parliament from this seat. Meanwhile, BJP's Hitendranath Goswami is challenging Gogoi from here.
The next high-stakes battle is taking place in Puducherry elections for all 30 seats. Voter turnout in Puducherry stood at 89.87% voter turnout, and this is the highest ever voter turnout recorded by the Union Territory.
Chief Minister N. Rangaswamy of the AINRC is contesting from Thatan Chavadi seat. The BJP and AIADMK are in alliance with Rangaswamy's AINRC. The opposition alliance is led by Congress and DMK, while new entrant TVK of actor Vijay is contesting on 28 seats.
And the next big electoral fight is taking place in Kerala, where 883 candidates are in the fray across 140 constituencies. Voter turnout in Kerala stood at 78.25% as per the latest count. It's a 3-cornered fight in the southern state. The ruling Left Democratic Front is led by communist parties, while their main challenger, United Democratic Front, is led by Congress. Meanwhile, the BJP-led NDA is also looking to expand its footprint in Kerala.
Kerala Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan and opposition leader V.D. Satheesan cast their ballots. Vijayan is seeking third term as Chief Minister. He is contesting elections from his home turf in Dharmadome.
Well, now here's a question. What if the heat you feel is no longer just uncomfortable but unsurvivable? A groundbreaking new study is challenging what we thought we knew about human limits in extreme heat.
Well, for years, scientists believe that the human body could withstand up to 6 hours at a wet bulb temperature of 35 degrees Celsius, which is a combination of heat and humidity that prevents the body from cooling itself. But that threshold, it turns out it may be far too optimistic.
From Mecca and Bangkok in 2024 to Phoenix in 2023 and earlier events in Australia, Pakistan and Spain, researchers re-examined some of the deadliest heat waves across the world. And none of these heat waves reached the so-called absolute limit. Instead, they killed thousands.
So what went wrong with our understanding? Scientists used a new model, one that doesn't just look at temperature and humidity, but also at how the human body actually functions under stress, especially with age, and what they found was alarming. In all 6 heat waves, there were periods where conditions became non-survivable for people over the age of 65. Even a few hours of outdoors without adequate shade or cooling could turn deadly.
Even shade was not enough in some cases, like the heat waves in Lakana and Phoenix. The heat was so intense that the body simply could not cool itself. In Lakana, conditions were extreme that even young, healthy adults faced deadly risk under direct sunlight.
So keeping the rising global warming into consideration, if today's heat can already breach human limits, what happens in a world that is 2 or 3 degrees warmer? India's electric vehicle story is picking up serious pace, and this time, a global crisis may be adding fuel to the shift.
The West Asia conflict led to oil price volatility and supply concerns among buyers, and that turned out to be an opportunity in disguise for the electric vehicle segments. So how exactly is it playing out in India, and how does it compare globally? Here's a report that tells you more. Take a look.
The financial year 2026 turned out to be a landmark year for India's EV industry. According to Federation of Automobile Dealers Association, total EV sales crossed 2.45 million units, growing nearly 25% from the last year, with strong double-digit growth across segments. Electric two-wheelers led the charge, crossing 1.4 million units, while three-wheelers dominated with over 60% segment share. Passenger EVs also surged 83%, nearing the 200,000 mark, while commercial EVs more than doubled. Clearly, India's EV shift is being driven by mass mobility, especially two- and three-wheelers. A key trigger behind this acceleration is a 50% surge in global oil prices and supply concern due to the West Asia conflict. Disruption around the critical routes like the Strait of Hormuz led to higher uncertainty about fuel prices and supply. Now, while India has not changed the pump prices for petrol and diesel vehicles, they do appear more expensive to run. And that is nudging consumers towards EVs as a more stable, green and cost-efficient option. Globally too, similar trends are visible. China has crossed 50% EV penetration in new car sales. It is using electrification as a hedge against oil shocks. In Pakistan, rising fuel costs are driving demand for electric two-wheelers. Even in developed markets, consumers are exploring EVs, but affordability remains a concern. Back home in India, automakers say consumer interest is clearly rising. Tata Motors told WION that higher fuel costs, better total cost of ownership, and improving charging infrastructure are driving more inquiries for EVs across the country. Dealers are also reporting increased footfalls and growing awareness around energy security and sustainability. But there's also a challenge emerging. Maruti Suzuki has warned that the West Asia conflict is pushing up commodity prices, from oil and gas to key metals, raising input costs for automakers. The company earlier this month indicated that it may have to pass on these costs to consumers even as it monitors potential supply disruptions going forward. Meanwhile, premium car makers are also seeing rising inquiries as affluent buyers look to hedge against fuel volatility and shift towards cleaner mobility.
What has recently worked in our favor in short term is the news about the oil prices going up and the disruption globally. And I think that really played on consumers' mind. And I think we were at the right place at the right time because we had this huge electric portfolio. Last year we did 21% of our sales through electric vehicles. And because of all the situation around, a lot more people are shifting to electric vehicles, and hence there's 83% growth in electric vehicles for us in quarter one.
Clearly, even in the luxury segment, EV interest is picking up gradually. BMW saw an increase in sales of over 120% in the 2026 financial year, while Kia saw a 790% jump as per the FADA data. India's EV story is clearly accelerating. Across two-wheelers, three-wheelers and even passenger vehicles, adoption is picking up pace year after year. And interestingly, global disruptions like the West Asia conflict may have accelerated the pace and acted as unexpected catalysts. Now the big question is, will this momentum sustain once geopolitical tensions ease? And that is something we'll be tracking closely. This is Kanishka Sarkar for WION with camera person Piyush Kumar.
Now, a Japanese drone company, Terra Drone, has partnered with a Ukrainian startup to mass-produce low-cost interceptor drones.
And this as countries look for cheaper ways to counter drone attacks. Terra Drone has joined forces with Ukraine's Amazing Drones to produce a $2,500 interceptor drone. Now, the aim is to offer a cheaper alternative to traditional air defense missiles, which can cost millions of dollars each. For comparison, a ground-launched Patriot interceptor missile, it can cost around $4 million, while Iranian-style Shahed drones are estimated to cost as little as $20,000. Since the start of the US-Israeli conflict with Iran, Tehran has launched large waves of low-cost drones, similar to those which are used by Russia in Ukraine. Now, US forces in Gulf states have relied on expensive missiles to shoot them down. And this has raised concerns about stockpiles, as large number of cheap drones can quickly drain advanced defense systems.
Shooting missiles down with missiles might be just fine, but shooting a Shahed that costs 5 million yen with a missile that costs several hundred million yen, that kind of economic irrationality just isn't feasible anymore, and people are starting to realize that.
The Japan-Ukraine partnership is designed to address this gap by using low-cost interceptor drones, which can be deployed in large numbers, reducing reliance on expensive US-made missiles. Terra Drone, which is known for commercial drones, announced its entry into defense sales last month. Its new interceptor system, called the Terra A1, has been designed to counter Shahed-style drones, similar to those used against Ukraine. Under the partnership, the Japanese company will provide investment and manufacturing expertise, while Ukrainian partners will contribute combat experience from the war. The drone is yet to be battle-tested and is expected to be delivered to Ukrainian forces for trials in the coming months. The development highlights a broader shift in modern warfare, where cheaper drones used in large numbers are changing the economics of air defense.
And now shifting our focus to the world of sports, 19-year-old Joao Fonseca is through to his first quarter-final at the Masters 1000 event.
The Brazilian teenager swept past Matteo Berrettini to set up a clash against world number 3 Alexander Zverev. Fonseca, who is making his first appearance in Monte Carlo, produced some superb tennis to see off an opponent who had thrashed Daniil Medvedev 6-0, 6-0 in the second round. The first set was tightly contested, staying on serve until the 7th game. Fonseca then secured a crucial break and went on to take the Oper 6-3 in 35 minutes. The Brazilian looked in control in the second set and broke early. Although Berrettini responded to level at 2-all, Fonseca quickly regained control and dictated the rest of the match. He broke once more on his way to a 60-62 victory in 1 hour and 14 minutes.
Now, Fonseca is the youngest player to reach the stage in Monte Carlo since Rafael Nadal and Richard Gasquet in 2005. He's also the first Brazilian to reach a Masters 1000 quarter-final since Thomas Bellucci in Madrid in 2011. Well, the teenager is just the second player born in 2006 to reach the quarter-finals of a Masters 1000 event. After Spain's Martin Landulus, and he did so in Miami earlier this year. His next opponent will be world number 3 Alexander Zverev, who defeated Zizou Bergs 6-2, 7-5.
We now get you latest updates from the world of entertainment. To celebrate the 30th anniversary of the iconic 1996 sports agent Ramedy, Jerry Maguire, the film is receiving a special theatrical re-release on April 12th, 14th, and 15th. Hollywood star Tom Cruise took to his social media stories to share the official release poster. The caption said, and I'm quoting, "Looking forward to sharing it with you all again in theaters next week." Directed by Cameron Crowe, the film originally earned 5 Academy Award nominations and secured a Best Supporting Actor win for Cuba Gooding Jr.
Meanwhile, anticipation is building for HBO's upcoming Harry Potter television reboot following the release of a new behind-the-scenes documentary, Finding Harry, the craft behind the magic. Well, the special has provided eager fans with a fresh batch of set photos and glimpses of the newly minted cast. The images showcase new series leads like Dominic McLaughlin as Harry, alongside seasoned veterans such as John Lithgow as Albus Dumbledore and Nick Frost as Rubus Hagrid. Now, following a highly detailed look into the Wizarding World's new era before its Christmas premiere.
Lance Taylor, who is universally known as Africa Bambaataa and widely celebrated as one of the founding architects of hip-hop, has passed away at the age of 68. His lawyer confirmed that the legendary DJ and producer died in Pennsylvania on Thursday following a battle with prostate cancer. And with that, we call a wrap to World Day for today. News and updates will follow on the other side. You're watching WION World is One. Stay tuned.
Five states, one powerful voice.
From Tamil Nadu to West Bengal,
Kerala to Assam. Every vote shapes the future. Get the election pulse only on WION.
get the latest updates.
Destroy their
Breaking
missiles
news.
and raise their...
Credible, clear, continuous. Experts across aisles. Diverse voices, one platform. WION World is one.
In this rapidly changing world, is your health keeping pace? Best practices and breakthroughs busting the hype with real insights. The timeless power of yoga and ancient healing. Good food, good mood. Small steps, big impact. Your health matters. Only on WION World is One. Because nothing matters more.
In West Asia, every move shifts the world's balance. Wars, ceasefires, alliances, power never stands still. From Tehran to Tel Aviv, from Damascus to Doha, the West Asia Post cuts through the chaos to reveal the region that shapes the world. Because what happens in West Asia never stays in West Asia. This is the West Asia Post, the region's story, the world's impact.
Campaigns, elections, alliances, controversies, and power play. Stories that analyze global and domestic politics. A dedicated show with varied perspectives, expert take, citizens' voices, detailed ground reports, and in-depth coverage from political corridors of the world. This is Race to Power, only on WION.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Get the latest updates.
Destroy their
Breaking
missiles
news.
and raise their...
Credible, clear, continuous. Experts across aisles. Diverse voices, one platform. WION World is one.
Thanks for staying with us. You are watching WION World is One and this is Speed News. Let's start with all top stories making headlines today. US President Donald Trump has hit out at Iran and accused it of doing a poor job of allowing oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz, warning that restrictions on the key waterway could undermine a fragile ceasefire. Posting on Truce Social, Trump also warned Iran against imposing a toll for ships passing through the crucial waterway, saying there were reports that tankers were being charged fees. He cautioned that if such measures were in place, they should be stopped immediately. In yet another post, he also claimed that very quickly oil start flowing with or without the help of Iran. Israel and Lebanon are likely to hold ceasefire talks in Washington next week. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu has confirmed that he has instructed his ministers to seek direct talks with Lebanon, pushing for Hezbollah's disarmament, but rejected the possibility of a truce before talks. He said that IDF will continue striking Hezbollah targets in Lebanon until security is fully restored in its northern regions. However, Lebanese government has stated that Beirut will not enter negotiations with Israel without a ceasefire in place, insisting that an immediate truce is a prerequisite for any diplomatic talks. Hezbollah leader Ali Fayyad said that the group rejects direct negotiations with Israel, insisting that Lebanon must first secure a ceasefire before any further steps are taken. Fayyad added that Lebanon's position should prioritize an Israeli withdrawal from Lebanese territory, as well as the return of displaced residents to their homes. His statement comes as IDF launched heavier strikes on Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah on